What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, and with the dawn of Anzac Weekend coming upon us for round 7 action, it is time to lock in our tips for said round and reflect on the round that was round 6, which was a very unique round in outcome, not just by who won, but the way that they won and the way that some teams underperformed. Kind of like me. I underperformed pretty severely because I only managed to tip 4 out of 9. It was a round where one of those losses I was incredibly happy with, and we'll get to that in time, but I think those of you that have been here for a while will know the pathway I'm trying to walk there. But some of these games, man, they just had some teams really come back into form, some other teams have dropped off. I don't know what the fuck's going on, but let's have a little bit of a reflection. Let's reflect. I'm starting to stutter because I did terribly and it's starting to affect me physically, okay? I did so fucking bad. Oh. Round 6 kicked off at the Gabba with Brisbane hosting Collingwood. I went Brisbane by 19 points. I thought, at their home deck, they're going to perform well. This was a game that they were never in. This wasn't a typical Brisbane game that we have seen through the 2025 season where they leave the gate open a little bit, the team gets the jump, and then they come back and win. This was a game where they left the gate wide open, let the opposition just waltz in, and they didn't close that gate. They just opened it up further, and I've been saying it for weeks. Brisbane's slow starts are going to come to haunt them at a particular point in the season when certain opposition come along and don't allow them to close that door. That gap that they put on them early is going to be too insurmountable to close. And that's exactly what happened in this game. Collingwood came out and absolutely destroyed them, and Brisbane just looked like a shadow of their former selves. That was my first blemish of the round. We tipped Carlton over North Melbourne. I think that was all but a formality, and they won in a pretty emphatic way. Essendon over West Coast. We got the win in the end, but for a very long time it looked like West Coast were going to force us a 3 out of 9, which would have absolutely killed me. Fremantle losing by 10 points to Melbourne. Something I didn't see, especially with how Melbourne have been playing versus Fremantle, but again, we see the inconsistencies of Fremantle creep in, and Melbourne finally getting their first win on the board. GWS and Adelaide in an incredibly scrappy game of football was something I didn't see coming, because GWS the week prior were just so incredibly strong, and I felt that they were going to back that up against Adelaide yet again in Adelaide, but nope, was not to be seen, and Adelaide starting to turn things around again. But as I mentioned with Fremantle, the same thing with Adelaide. Inconsistency is key. The next loss, I'm okay with, because I always say, if Richmond, the team that I'm going to be backing against, they are my team, and I love them. I bleed yellow and black. But when it comes to footy tipping, you got to tip with your head, not your heart. And I honestly did think history had dictated Richmond don't play well at Marvel. They don't play well against the Gold Coast at Marvel. We got to lock in the Gold Coast here. Richmond obviously bringing in Noah Bolter this week, and for this game was a turning point and a talking point, but we managed to get the job done by 11 points, and I couldn't be any more stoked, because those of you that said that we wouldn't win a game, we already beat Carlton. For those of you that said we wouldn't win one after that, fuck you guys, we've won 2. Now we move on. Sydney versus Port Adelaide. We tipped Sydney at home. Port Adelaide obviously doing the upset on them. The Bulldogs did it very comfortably against St Kilda, and we tipped Geelong against Hawthorn. So it was Geelong, the Bulldogs, Sydney, it was Essendon, and it was Carlton. Hang on a minute. No, I didn't. Why did I say Sydney won? I'm such a fucking idiot. My 4 correct tips were Geelong, Bulldogs, Essendon, and Carlton. I was sitting there thinking, why am I counting 5? And then I realised it's because I'm a fuckhead. 4 out of 9 was where I landed. 7 out of 9 was the best in my tipping competition for the round. So the Cocaine Cowboys, Paul S. and Captain Jack Joe D, both tipping 7 out of 9, being the league winners for the round. Congratulations to you guys. And we turn our attention to total tips, where we see Jazz Sky 13, Jazz S still holding a 1-tip lead ahead of Psycho Lana S, or Skyvo. Is it Skyvo? Whatever it is, they're leading, and then we've got Sean AE, we've got Macca0303, and then we have a handful following on 39 to round out our top 10, some of which have been around for a very long time, so it's good to see some consistency still creeping in from the guys that have been here from the get-go. We're up to 28. We did drop this week with the 4 out of 9, but hopefully this week is a little bit more clean cut. We can kind of break even with maybe a 7 or an 8 out of 9. That'd be fantastic, and I think with the rounds that we've got presented, the games within the round rather, I think it is very possible to get high 7s and 8s collectively across the board this week. Kicking off tomorrow night, Thursday night football, Anzac Day Eve, Melbourne versus Richmond, which has some complications about it already because, for those of you that aren't aware, Noah Bolter's sentencing was handed down, and part of his sentencing was a 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew, which was not waived for AFL purposes. It has been locked in. So Noah Bolter cannot play any games that are pertaining to night games for the rest of the season, or at least for the next 3 months, which is pretty much the home and away season anyway. So no Noah Bolter this week, which is a shame because he played such a key in our win against the Gold Coast last week, and I would have been more comfortable with tipping Richmond coming into this game had he had played. Opportunity comes knocking. Campbell Gray gets an opportunity this week, which is fantastic. I'm still very tempted here to go Richmond in an upset because Melbourne might have won a game, but they are still playing very scrappy football, and Richmond just dig deep and find a way to get things done, and seeing that last week was absolutely incredible. And obviously the Gold Coast have been far superior than what Melbourne have, so dictating that, you would think that Richmond, if they put in a good effort against, the Gold Coast, they can get the job done against Melbourne. But then again, you've got Melbourne who could get an early jump on Richmond, and Richmond are chasing tail. At either rate, I think this is going to be a cracking game of football. I'm going to go out on a limb. I am going to go Richmond for the upset, and I am going to go Richmond by 13 points. I think it's going to be a very close game. Stephen May comes back into the team this week, which is a bit upsetting because I think Tom Lynch would have gotten off the chain without him in there. But I still feel without Jake Lever, Richmond can capitalise in that forward half. So I am going to go Richmond for an upset. We've got to do a little bit of point of difference moving forward. Anzac Day football Friday during the day, always a marquee calendar moment for any AFL fan. Collingwood versus Essendon, going to be an absolute cracker. Collingwood's just back to form. They are just... defensively, offensively, they are looking fantastic. They could be very well at this point in time the best looking collective team in the competition. Hard to back against them, and I'm locking them in. Friday night, we have Fremantle hosting Adelaide over at Optus Stadium. I think this is more line ball than what people think. I vastly liked seeing what Adelaide did against GWS than what Fremantle did against Melbourne. However, that being said, Fremantle aren't a team that typically travel to the MCG all too well. Back on their home deck, they should have advantage here. I'm going to lock in Fremantle tentatively. Tomorrow night we'll get the teams for other games, at least for the Friday night games. Depending on where the teams are at, I might change to Adelaide, but I'm happy to lock in Fremantle for the time being. Marvel Stadium Saturday afternoon, Brisbane, St Kilda. Going Brisbane. It's at Marvel. There is room for upset. St Kilda have done it to Brisbane before, but I think Brisbane are going to bounce back after a poor performance against Collingwood last week. They're not going to have 2 poor performances back-to-back. It is just unfortunate. St Kilda are the team they run up against this week. Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide taking on North Melbourne. Port Adelaide get that done quite comfortably at home after what we saw against North Melbourne. Up at Marvel Stadium, which is essentially their home turf, going to Port Adelaide, and their home deck, nah, I don't see it happening. Port Adelaide are going to win this one by 50 points. At the bare minimum, I feel. I mean, if Carlton got off the chain as big as they did, Port Adelaide should absolutely destroy them. Manuka Oval, Saturday night, we have GWS taking on the Bulldogs. Again, a game that I think is very much line ball more than what we are given, but back on their home turf, embarrassed against Adelaide last week. I think GWS get it done, but this is going to be a cracking game. This game right here, outside of Collingwood Essendon, which obviously I feel will be game of the round, I think GWS and the Bulldogs won't be far behind it. Sunday, first of 3, People's First Stadium, Gold Coast taking on Sydney. Again, very hard to back against Gold Coast at People's First. Comfortable to lock them in. They lost a close one against Richmond. They finished incredibly strong coming home against Richmond last week, and I think they will eat Sydney up, especially with Sydney now having to do some makeshift kind of things with their forward line, and they've got players dropping left, right and centre with injury. I think Gold Coast will capitalise quite big. MCG, Carlton, Geelong. Geelong get this one done. I don't see Carlton causing them any problems whatsoever. And then at Marvel Stadium, we have Hawthorn taking on the West Coast, and I don't think the West Coast are going to make moves here. Hawthorn should win this one very comfortably, 30 to 40 points. Thank you very much. Let's save it. We are rolling with Richmond, Collingwood, Fremantle, Brisbane, Port Adelaide, GWS, Gold Coast, Geelong, and Hawthorn. That being said, the gauntlet begins this week. We can lock in a tip. For the gauntlet, and for those of you who don't know what the gauntlet is a particular thing on the AFL website where you choose a team that you think is going to be the guaranteed winner for that round. You just pick one team, and that locks them out moving forward as an available selection. So ideally, if I thought Richmond was going to win here, I would take Richmond, because you would think Richmond wouldn't win many more games for the rest of the season, and if this one's winnable, then you'd take them. But I'm going to go with something to take another team off the board, and I think out of the teams that are available here, I can see Collingwood winning more, I can see Fremantle winning more, I can see Brisbane winning more, Port winning more, GWS, Geelong, Hawthorn. So I'm going to take Gold Coast as my certainty this week at People's First. That's going to be my selection for the gauntlet, and that locks up everything for this particular round. And that is it for the video. Do hope you guys enjoyed. A little bit later in the week than I would have loved to expected, but with the short turnaround, with Easter weekend spanning out a little bit longer, and obviously the game creeping up earlier in the week, I've been a little bit flooded with things. But we got there. We got it done. Do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, continue to leave likes on the video. Leave comments down below. Let me know how your team is faring this year and how you feel where your team is currently situated. That'd be a great discussion point. And do subscribe if you want to get on board the community we are building. Slowly but surely it is growing, and I can't thank you guys enough for getting on board and supporting what I do. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here. Good luck to your teams this weekend, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.